Emotions are centered in the lower part of the brain.
How was insanity seen in the past? And is modern society making us mentally ill? From the dawn of man to current challenges, including the impact of social media and new psychedelic treatments.
Electroshock therapy may be recommended for other disorders.
Meet the experts in talks about all aspects of mental illness, from historical perspectives to contemporary challenges and future innovations. Welcome to Engelsberg's Interviews on Mental Health. I'm here with Brian Primack. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You're a physician, researcher, author, professor at Oregon State University.
Mm-hmm.
What is mental health to you?
For me, mental health is not just the absence of mental disease. It's much more a positive thing. It is the ability, in my view, to really experience all of the wonderful things that this world has to offer. Things like friendship and kindness and love and art. And if one is able to do that, I think they have good mental health.
Okay, so what would be the opposite to mental health?
The opposite would be to be closed off. To not be able to experience these things because of darkness, because of depression, anxiety, loneliness, those types of things.
And now you claim that there is a global health crisis. What is that?
Yes, there is, I believe, a global crisis in mental health. We are seeing higher rates of suicide than we have in decades. We are seeing higher rates of depression, anxiety, and general malaise in society.
Is that evenly distributed throughout the globe, or is it a specific Western or Eastern, or where is that? Where is the...
It does seem to be more concentrated in Western countries as compared to Eastern countries. But that being said, we are seeing it globally. For example, even before COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people blame the COVID-19 pandemic on a lot of the mental health crisis. But even before that, the World Health Organization declared about a year or two before COVID-19 that depression was now the worldwide leading cause of disability. Before that, the most important cause of disability in the world was musculoskeletal pain, back pain, the inability to go to work because you physically couldn't. But all of a sudden, in around 2018, the World Health Organization said, no, it's depression is what is preventing people from going to work.
And that is not because back pains has gone down, but...
That's right. It was back pain will always be there, and it continues to be there, but depression has been rising.
Yes. You talk about COVID-19, so what role has that played in the mental health issue?
I think that COVID-19 was a catalyst. We have been going to a more digital culture anyway, and I think that COVID-19 sped that up. Now, COVID-19 also caused other problems that led to decreases in mental health because many people perished. They died. Families were not able to complete school the way they wanted to. They weren't able to see each other and continue family traditions and that type of thing. So COVID-19 definitely played a part in accelerating what was already there. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that it was already there. I mentioned the World Health Organization and depression, but in addition, for example, the UK had just appointed a minister of loneliness. Ministries in the UK are for things like defense and housing and human services. And all of a sudden, loneliness became such an important crisis that they needed to create a minister of loneliness.
Do you think that's a good thing, or is it... What do you think about that?
Well, I think it was a good response. I'm glad that they recognized that there was a problem with loneliness and that this did, in fact, cause other problems. Loneliness is a problem in itself.
Yeah.
It's not good for human beings to feel lonely because we are a very social creature. However, loneliness also leads to other mental health conditions. It increases anxiety, depression, the risk of suicide. And importantly, loneliness is also linked to heart disease, to worse outcomes from things like diabetes, blood pressure. And so loneliness is something that is so important to so many different things that it's worth it to create a minister of loneliness if that's what we need to do.
Mm-hmm. But in this day of social media, I mean, nobody has to be lonely anymore. Or, I mean, what role does social media play in the loneliness issue?
Yes, it's a great question because I can reach in my pocket and have 700 friends, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I can have a lot of friends. Well, what we are noticing, those of us who research social media, is that the appearance is not the same as reality. In fact, we're seeing sometimes it's opposite. We, for example, in some of our studies have shown that the more you use social media, the more friends you have, actually, you're more likely to feel lonely. You are more likely to be depressed and anxious if you use social media more often.
That sounds like a contradiction. Why is that?
It sounds like a contradiction. Well, I think there are a few different reasons. And by the way, there's no perfect answer because this is why we are researching it actively. One possibility is displacement. If I am spending time with my 700 friends on my device, then I am not spending real in-person time with a human being. And over centuries, thousands, millions of years of evolution, we have come to need in-person relationships. To actually see somebody, interact with somebody, to recognize the human smile, the human voice, human play. And those are the kinds of things we can't necessarily recreate. The other thing is that when social media, the word media or medium is something that's in the middle, you know, like small, medium, large. Well, in this case, a medium is between me and you. So maybe you're on the other side of my phone. So that phone, that medium between us, can cause a lot of unnecessary problems, unnecessary challenges. For example, you might be very sad. You might be having a very difficult day, but you're not going to show me that on the phone. You are going to be smiling and taking a picture in front of some beautiful place that you are. Meanwhile, really, you're miserable. And I think that you are very happy, so I can't empathize. I can't tell you, I'm sorry you're not feeling bad or you're not feeling well. Tell me what's going on with you. I can't be a really good friend. Instead, I think that everything is good with you. And that makes me feel bad about myself too, because the world is filled with difficulties and challenges. That's part of what it is to be a human being. We all have sadness. We all have anxiety. We all have anger. And it's important to be able to acknowledge these things. But in this society where we're just looking at the surface, we're not really listening to each other. We're not having a real friendship. And I think that may be why we're seeing what seems like an odd phenomenon of I've got lots of friends right in my pocket, but I really don't have many friends.
No. Sounds like a sad thing. You talk about something you call food-like substances. Mm-hmm. Or a food-like substance.
Yeah.
It's a word coined by Michael Pollan. Mm-hmm. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so Michael Pollan is a scholar related to food, and he wrote a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma. And what he says is that in our society today, we are not consuming as much food, and we're consuming food-like substances. And I think what he means by that is that over centuries of being human beings, we have eaten what we could find in the world, berries and apples and fish and that type of thing. However, in today's world, because they're cheaper to manufacture, we're eating many other things that are not as real. So for example, instead of having an apple, we have some kind of a sugar cereal that has apple flavoring. It might not have any apples in it at all. Now, the box of the cereal has a big picture of an apple on it. But that's a false representation, because really what I'm eating is sugar, apple flavoring that was created in a laboratory, artificial fillers and things like that. So it's pretending to be food, but it's not really. It's a food-like substance. And the reason that I mention that in my work is that I think that social media is in a similar way, a social-like experience. It seems to be providing a friend. It seems to be providing connection. But is it really providing the connection that we as human beings need to feel like we have companionship, like we have friendship, like we have love? I don't think so often. That doesn't mean that there aren't some positive things. Just like food-like substances can still give you calories. They can still give you taste that you like. But is it really giving you the nutrients? And that is why I use that idea of the food-like substance that Michael Pollan coined, and then extend that to think about social relationships versus social-like relationships.
Yes. So, and you also speak about what you call highlight reel phenomenon. Mm-hmm. So is that related to this, or what does that mean?
It is. So the highlight reel phenomenon comes back to that idea where all of us, when we post things to our social media, when we show people our exterior, we're not really showing what is going on with our lives. We're showing the best moment, because we're taking 300 pictures, but we're only posting one. We're posting that one where we look the thinnest, where we look the happiest, where we look the most perfect. But the truth is, that's not what people really experience every day. And so, if you are spending a lot of time on social media and you are seeing the best moment of that person's life, and the best moment of this person's life, and the best moment of this person's life, you feel like, oh my gosh, none of those things are happening to me. This person's on vacation. This person, their child, just won an award. What I'm not seeing is the fact that 99% of the time, this person is not on vacation. 99% of the time, this person's child is not winning an award, and maybe something even very difficult is happening to that child. So by being exposed to the highlights only, we're not really recognizing the full experience of life. And that can make us feel, in comparison, like we're not good enough.
No. Well, like you put it now, it sounds like we should just, take these devices and throw them away. You touch a bit on that there are some positive things about them too. So, I mean, are there anything good about the social media?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. There are things that are good and positive. There are a lot of opportunities for creativity. There are tools where people can create videos and stories, and those can have very positive pro-social messages. Social media also help people keep in touch who might not otherwise. If part of your family, here we are in Sweden, I live in the United States, well, I can communicate with my friends and show them pictures of this beautiful place where we are sitting. And that is amazing, and it's wonderful. What are some other positive things? Because there are so many. There are a lot of rare conditions that people have, maybe a disease that is very uncommon. So I can't find other people in my city that have that condition, but I can go onto a community, a virtual community, and find hundreds of other people that are suffering with the same condition. And that's just a small example. I can also find other people that share hobbies that I have, that maybe I can't find a lot of people on my street, but if I have a favorite author, and not many of the people that I live near love that author, but I find somebody in Thailand and somebody in California and somebody in Switzerland who I can interact with those people about that author. So I think all of these things are positive, and it's why I think that even though we're seeing a lot of negatives, we need to figure out a way to do both.
Yeah.
We need to figure out a way to try to get as much of the positive and emphasize that, but also to decrease the negative.
And how can we do that? I mean, in Sweden, we have just got recommendations on the time we should spend on the screens. They are specifically aimed towards children and young adults, but is that a good way to go?
It's a very good question, and I think we do need guidelines. Now, guidelines are just guidelines. They're not, exact rules. But what I like to think of, since we mentioned before that there are some similarities between food and social media, I think that in today's society, social media is similar to food. I mean, obviously, it's not exactly the same. You need food to live. And if I didn't have social media tomorrow, I could still live. But you could argue that in today's society, to function, you do sort of need social media. When you go to school, that's how you communicate what the homework assignment is and that type of thing. And so when you're at work, this is how we interact with each other. So in many ways, it is necessary. And so guidelines might help us. So you mentioned the guideline of a certain number of hours, say, maximum for social media. And I think that that is something to think about. The way I think about it is, again, since we were talking about food before, in the United States, in the early 1990s, they developed what was called the food pyramid.
Yeah.
And the food pyramid was an acknowledgement of the fact that a lot of foods were not the best foods to be having. And so they created something in the shape of a pyramid that told us what to have more of and what to have less of. And so I think maybe we need to do something similar to that. So in the book that I wrote, You Are What You Click, I do have a pyramid, but it only has 3 levels. And the bottom level is be selective. And I think that the amount of time that you use social media is part of being selective. But it's not the only part of being selective. It's also being very selective about who you interact with. It's about being selective in terms of which platforms you emphasize and which ones you don't. And then there are other levels to the pyramid. The second level is be positive, and the top level is be creative. And I feel like if we're able to do all of those things well, then we can use social media in a way that emphasizes the positives and minimizes the negatives.
So how are you on this pyramid, and how are you a good media user yourself or social media user?
It's a very good question, and I'm like everybody else. Even though I study it, I still fall into the same traps. And I need to remind myself, wait a second, I need to be more selective. I just went through a period where I wasn't positive enough. I need to be positive. And then I went through a period where I need to be more creative. And when I say creative, I don't mean like arts and crafts or anything like that. I mean really going the next step. So an example of being creative with how we use social media might be that I tailor my use to my personality. We don't normally think of that. We think of ourselves as, I'm going to use this platform a certain number of hours a day or a certain time of the day or something. But we don't really think to ourselves, if I'm more of an extrovert, which kinds of social media should I use? If I am someone who's more neurotic, which kinds of social media should I use and which should I de-emphasize? So in my book, I have actually a personality quiz, and then based on the results of that quiz, there are 5 chapters based on the 5 major personality types according to one major system that people use for personality. And each one discusses if you scored high on agreeability, these are the things that you might have as challenges, and these are the things that you might have as positive things. So sometimes I'm able to do those things, and sometimes I need to remind myself also, I am certainly not perfect. And even though I am developing these things and think about them a lot, I need to remind myself as well.
So, Brian, it seems like the negative is more dominant on social media. Is that true?
Yes, this is a finding that we have studied, and we have found that the more social media people are exposed to that is positive, it's a little bit helpful. But the more that people are exposed to that's negative, it's very detrimental. And that seems to, I know that might sound funny at first, but this is a concept in sociology that a lot of people are familiar with. The term is negativity bias. So you can think about it this way. Imagine you're back in school, right? And you're taking 4 classes. And in 3 of your classes, you're doing outstanding. You know, you're getting an A if the classes are A, B, C, D, you know. But then in 1 class, you're getting a D. Which are you going to be thinking about the most? Well, you'll probably be focused on the area where you're having the most difficulty. And it is that way with social media also. And because there are so many hundreds, thousands of messages, there's a lot of opportunity for that negativity bias. The example I like to give is that there's a very famous movie star, Tom Holland. He played Spider-Man in the most recent series of Spider-Man movies, and people love him. He is very good looking, and he's an outstanding actor, and he's a heartthrob. You know, people just love him. 98% of the messages he gets on social media, I am sure, are very, very positive and loving and caring. but he recently stopped using all social media because those 2% bother him so much when he gets those difficult comments. And so that's an example of how negativity bias can affect all of us. So this is yet another reason why I have positivity as a very important part of that social media pyramid, because the negative can be so powerful.
Yeah. So do you think we are naive that we don't see these problems? I mean, it sounds like a huge problem to me.
Yes, I do think it's a huge problem, and I think your question is a good one because I think it's half and half. I do think that we all recognize that it is an issue, but I don't think we recognize the extent to which it is an issue, and I don't think we recognize all of the ways that it affects us. In other words, I think people might say, oh, sure, social media, I wish I did less social media. But I think they probably don't realize that it really is keeping them from living their best life. That it really, when they take out the phone, when they're in the line at the supermarket, instead of just taking a moment for reflection or for a conversation with somebody, that they really are harming their own inability to be happy and to be fulfilled. So yes, I think people will say, oh, I acknowledge that it's an issue, but I don't think they realize how much.
We're talking about mental health here and social media. But if we take it to the broader, I have one final question, and it's about you as well. So if there was a diagnosis that could portray you and your mental health, what would that be?
Well, I would say that in our society in general, we are not connecting with people as well. And I fit into that because I'm very busy. I'm a physician, and I'm a professor, and I'm a researcher, and I also try to keep up with friends and family. And there are only so many hours in the day. I also have to, to come here to be with you. It's wonderful to be here, but I had to travel for 26 hours to get here. And so during that period of time, I wasn't necessarily able to have those positive connections every step of the way. And when I was on the airplane, everyone next to me is staring down at their device. So do these things affect me? Absolutely. And in many ways, I would rather live in a society where we didn't have the devices, because then maybe I would sit down next to the person like I remember 30 years ago and actually have a conversation and maybe even a little bit of a connection. So I experienced that same kind of loneliness, of alienation from other human beings. And of course, I try to find that in as many ways as possible, to talk with people like you and other people who I will be speaking with today at the seminar. But like I said before, I am certainly not perfect, and my society and my habits are sometimes counter to what I would think of as most appropriate.
Thank you very much, Brian Primack.
And thank you.